Okay, so we're really diving deep this time, like getting into, the nitty-gritty of actually achieving goals. And more importantly, like how do we break free from procrastination? Yeah. You, our listeners, have made it pretty clear. You're not here for the typical self-help fluff, right?
Hmm?
You want the raw, the unfiltered, even if it's a little tough to hear. And the source material we're tackling today, well, let's just say it doesn't pull any punches. So we're starting with this question. And I think it's something a lot of us can relate to, right? It's that feeling of how do I stop wasting time?
Yeah.
And then the other side of that coin, how do I actually get motivated?
It's funny, isn't it? It's almost like the person asking this is kind of begging for a reality check. You know, like cut through all the self-help jargon and just give it to me straight.
Yeah, exactly. It's refreshing, actually. And the first voice we hear in this material, they do exactly that. Like they just come right out and say, stop overthinking everything.
Oh.
It's like they can see us, stuck in our heads, overcomplicating things.
Mm.
Oh, it's the worst, isn't it? That feeling of being totally paralyzed because you just can't decide on the perfect first move.
Right, exactly.
And the source doesn't let us off the hook. They call out that tendency to just stay stuck. And they're not afraid to use some strong language to get the point across.
It's definitely a wake-up call. It's like they're saying, look, if you're not actively moving towards what you want, then you're choosing to stay stuck. And they even bring up those statistics, about how most people, they don't actually make any significant changes in their lives.
Yeah, those stats, they can be hard to hear, but there's a grain of truth there, unfortunately. It's like they're trying to shake us out of complacency.
Yeah, for sure. It's that tough love approach. And they go even further, talking about this loser mentality, this fear of trying and failing, which, I mean, let's be real, that keeps so many people from actually going after what they want.
Yeah.
And to combat that, they keep coming back to this idea of a warrior mindset, like embracing discipline, pushing through discomfort.
Right, because motivation, it can be so fleeting. You can't just wait around for it to strike.
It's like they're saying action creates motivation, not the other way around.
That's such a good point. And there's another voice in these sources. They use this really powerful analogy. Shoot the gun.
Ooh, I like that one.
Right. It doesn't even matter if you hit the target right away. What matters is that you take action. Because even if you miss, at least now you know where to adjust.
Totally. It's like you can't hit a target you can't even see, right?
Yeah.
And this idea of just starting, even imperfectly, I mean, that's huge. It reminds me of breaking down those big, intimidating goals
Uh-huh.
into smaller, more manageable steps. So you're not so overwhelmed by the need for everything to be perfect before you even begin.
Yeah. It's about silencing that inner critic. The one that's always saying, wait, it's not good enough yet.
Oh, tell me about it. I know that voice well.
Mhm.
But, okay, so this is where things get really interesting, this first speaker. They almost seem to want the listener to feel a little riled up, maybe even a little angry. They actually say, and I quote, "I hope this pisses you off," which on the surface seems kind of counterproductive, right?
Yeah, I can see how that might seem a little jarring at first.
But it's like they're tapping into something very real about how we're wired.
Absolutely. Sometimes we need that little push, that fire in our belly to actually make a change.
So it's less about wallowing in anger
Yeah,
and more about channeling that energy.
exactly. It's fuel.
And this actually ties into their whole emphasis on discipline over motivation.
Oh, 100%. Because let's face it, motivation, it comes and goes.
It's fleeting.
Exactly. But discipline is what creates those lasting changes. It's about building habits that support your goals, even on the days you don't feel like it.
And it's interesting because this is a theme we've heard from other guests too. Like people who've accomplished some incredible things, they all seem to agree. It's not about those big bursts of inspiration. It's about showing up consistently, even when it's tough. It's about playing the long game.
Which, let's be honest, is way harder than it sounds.
Totally. And that's where systems come in, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't always rely on willpower alone. We need structures in place to support us.
Right. It's like setting yourself up for success.
Okay, but here's where the conversation takes a turn. The speaker, they introduce this concept of player versus player, like in the gaming world.
Oh, interesting.
And it gets us thinking about how everyone starts the game of life, so to speak, with different resources and advantages.
That's so important to acknowledge because we're not all starting from the same place.
Exactly. And they bring this up not to discourage us, but to encourage a realistic perspective.
Yeah.
Like, don't underestimate the obstacles you might face based on where you're starting from, but also don't let those obstacles define your journey.
It's about understanding the landscape, right? And then figuring out how to navigate it effectively.
Yeah, and this is where they share their own story about their family history, their ancestors, and how they feel this deep sense of responsibility to honor their lineage.
Yeah.
Like their ancestors struggled so they could have a better life.
Yeah.
And it's about tapping into that, finding motivation that goes beyond just, wanting a better job or more money.
It's about connecting to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And while they talk about honoring your past, they also make it clear it's not about blindly adopting someone else's values. It's about figuring out what resonates with you.
What gives your life meaning?
Yes. And using that as fuel to propel you forward.
I love that. It's almost like building a house, you know?
Okay.
You wouldn't expect a house to stand strong without a good foundation.
Right.
It's the same with our goals.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond that initial excitement, that spark of inspiration, and actually getting into the nuts and bolts of making it happen. And that's something this source material really emphasizes, right? Like systems, not just, oh, I feel inspired.
Yeah, it's not a feeling.
Right.
It's about having something in place
Yeah.
that supports you, even when,
Mm.
because willpower, we all know it comes and goes.
Oh, absolutely. I've been there so many times where I get so excited about something and then life happens. And I don't have those structures in place to keep me going.
It's so easy to fall off track.
It is.
So these systems, they're like guardrails almost.
Yeah, I'm
They keep us moving in the right direction, even when we're tempted to veer off course.
So what might that look like? Like, what are some concrete examples of systems we can put in place?
Well, it can be as simple as, using a planner
Oh,
or a habit tracking app, something to help you stay organized and accountable.
yeah, those tools can be super helpful, especially in our digital world.
Right, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Right.
Even just setting aside a specific time each day to work on your goal.
Yeah, that consistency is key.
Exactly. It's about making it a non-negotiable part of your routine.
And I think that's where the discipline comes in, right? Because it's easy to say, oh, I'll get to it later. But when you have those systems, those structures in place, it's like you're making a commitment to yourself.
Yeah.
You're saying, this matters to me, and I'm going to make time for it.
That's so powerful.
It is.
Because it shifts us from being, passive bystanders in our own lives
Right.
to active participants.
And that's what this whole journey is about, right?
It's about taking control, making conscious choices, and creating a life that we're excited to wake up to every day.
I love that. And, it's interesting because this actually ties back to something we were discussing earlier about defining success on our own terms.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think a lot of times we get caught up in this idea of external validation. Like success means having a certain job title or a certain amount of money.
Or a certain number of followers on social media.
Yes. All of that.
It's so easy to get swept up in that noise.
It is.
But true fulfillment, I think, it comes from aligning with your values, with what truly matters to you deep down.
And I think that's a really important point, especially as we're, talking about these bigger themes of motivation, discipline. It's not just about achieving any goal, right? It's about pursuing goals that are actually meaningful to us.
Exactly, because when you're passionate about what you're doing, when it aligns with your core values, that's when the motivation flows naturally. That's when the discipline becomes less about willpower and more about pure enjoyment.
That's such a good point. Because it's not always going to be easy, right? There will be challenges, setbacks.
Oh, for sure.
But when you're connected to that deeper why, it's like those challenges, they become almost like opportunities for growth.
Absolutely. They become part of the journey, not roadblocks.
Yes, and I think that's such a powerful shift in perspective. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing that we have more control than we often give ourselves credit for.
It's empowering, isn't it?
It really is. So as we kind of start to bring this deep dive to a close, what are your final thoughts on everything we've unpacked here?
I think what really stands out to me is just how refreshingly honest the source material is. It's not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
Right. It's not sugarcoating anything.
No, not at all. And while that might not be everyone's cup of tea,
Sure.
I think there's something really valuable in that directness.
I agree.
It's It's like a splash of cold water to the face.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
It wakes us up to the reality of the situation, and it forces us to really examine our own role in all of this.
Instead of making excuses. So
Exactly.
we're really taking this to heart. It's about more than just, listening to a podcast episode. It's about taking action.
100%.
It's about, like, what are the concrete steps we can take to actually implement these ideas into our lives?
And to create lasting change.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the key, isn't it? Because anyone can have a burst of motivation, but it's the follow-through, the discipline, the systems we put in place. That's what actually moves the needle.
It's about playing the long game
Exactly.
and remembering that it's a journey, not a destination.
Oh, I like that.
There will be ups and downs, twists and turns,
Sure.
but it's about embracing the whole process.
The good, the bad, the messy.
All of it.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored some really powerful ideas, but ultimately the most important journey is the one you take within yourself.
It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
It does. It's about tuning out the noise of the outside world, all those expectations, those shoulds and shouldn'ts, and really listening to that inner voice, the one that knows you better than anyone.
Trusting your gut.
Yes, trusting your gut. And then, most importantly, having the courage to act on it, to actually take those steps, even if they're small, even if they scare you a little, because that's where the magic happens. That's where you discover who you're truly capable of becoming. This has been an incredible conversation.
I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me. And to everyone listening, keep asking those tough questions. Keep pushing your own boundaries. And never, never stop believing in your own potential. Until next time.